Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm a rising senior at Crystal Springs. Today I completed my fourth and final milestone for my project for the phone-controlled robot arm. And this milestone pretty much entailed integrating the car into my phone app and having that be able to control both the car and the arm at the same time. So the first step for this was to add the car controls into the phone app, and I added some cool features like being able to link and unlink the motors, which would allow people to easily go straight forward and straight backwards, and then unlink the motors and like do turns or spins or whatever they wanted. And so it's basically just making it easier for people to control the motors, because it's pretty difficult to actually just use them. It's a lot more difficult to use the DC motors than it is to use the servos and manipulate those. So a lot of what I did for the phone app for the car controls was to just make it easier and more user-friendly. I also tried making some more complicated buttons that would execute more complex things like exact 90-degree turns for the user without them having to actually manipulate the sliders and change the speeds of the motors. But I was really held back in this respect by the way that the HC6 Bluetooth module sets up connections, which I'll talk about a bit more in my paragraph. But basically, I could not write some more of the complicated programs into my app that I wanted to. So, but the app does work, and it does have like a decent amount of buttons and sliders that you can use to control the car. It's just that some of the more complicated things are a bit harder to achieve using the app. And yeah, but the next step in this milestone was to write the Arduino code for the Arduino microcontroller that would allow it to control the car given the outputs from the phone. And so writing this code was a lot easier than writing the code for the Arduino to control the arm, because I had already encountered and solved a lot of the problems that came with App Inventor and with Bluetooth. And having solved all these problems already made it much more straightforward for me to write the code for controlling the DC motors for the car. And there were a few challenges I ran into, which mostly had to do with the way that I designed my App Inventor app. And basically, like I said, I kind of simplified the way the App Inventor app works, and the app doesn't really line up with what's actually happening to control the motors and the motor driver. So basically, the app is very intuitive and user-friendly, but the way the app is designed does not line up with the way that, like, the app controls don't line up with the actual controls, if that makes sense. So a lot of the work I had to do in the Arduino program was to make the two kind of sync up, like what the user sees and what's actually happening, make that sync up. And that was a lot of fun, actually. And yeah, but after I'd finished that milestone, that step, which as I had said was much more straightforward than the previous Arduino coding that I did in milestone 2. I had to test everything to confirm that the phone app properly controlled the car, and it was here that I ran into some actual issues. For example, the right motor, just by design for some reason, is significantly slower than the left motor, so I had to shift the values that were being given for the right motor and make those greater than the left motor to make sure that when the app says that the speeds are the same, they're actually the same. And then I also had to shift the phone app slider values to prevent stalling, so it basically made them more sensitive and made it much more responsive for the user by shifting things in the Arduino code. And then also the greatest problem I ran into was that the servers would sometimes stop working. And after doing some testing, I diagnosed this as a voltage issue, because with the motor driver, the Arduino is now giving some of its power to the motor driver. And before adding the motor driver, there's already barely sufficient voltage and power being supplied from the Arduino for the servos. So now that the motor driver is draining some of that power, there's not enough for the Arduino to still supply power to the servos, which caused them to sometimes just drop power and like stop working, and the Bluetooth connection to sometimes just reset. So I solved this by adding a second battery pack up here, which was a bit of a challenge considering the lack of space, but I made it work. And just rewiring things to make sure that this battery pack is just dedicated to the servos and the Bluetooth module, and making sure that they're always up and running, whereas the Arduino now just supplies extra power to the motor driver. But yeah, now everything works, and I think it's been a great 3 weeks. I've learned a lot, had a lot of fun, and my project is complete now with my first modification.